Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving deep into the incredible history of the Russian language. It's this amazing story that's been woven together from ancient tribes, massive reforms, and a true melting pot of cultures. So if you've ever been curious about where this language actually comes from, well, we're about to put all the pieces together for you. Okay, so let's start with a big one, the alphabet. Most people think they know the answer to this, but honesty, the real story is so much more interesting than the common myth. We're talking Greek monks, their super dedicated students, and a script that looked absolutely nothing like the one used today. So here's how we're going to break it all down. We'll start at the very beginning with the language's ancient roots, then get the true story on the alphabet. After that, we'll look at the split between church language and everyday speech, see how it soaked up words from all over, and watch how the modern language was hammered into shape, before finally checking out the language as it is today. All right, section 1. Let's rewind the clock way, way back. Long before a country called Russia even existed, there was this common language that basically united all the Eastern Slavs. It was this huge linguistic community that stretched all across Eastern Europe. See, in the beginning, Russian, Ukrainian, and Belarusian weren't really separate languages yet. They were all just dialects of the same thing. This means someone from, say, Novgorod in the north could head south to Kyiv and chat with the locals. No problem. No translator needed. They were all speaking what we now call Old East Slavic. And this early language had some really unique quirks. Get this, no native homegrown words started with the letter A or the letter F. Can you imagine? So any Russian word you hear today that starts with one of those letters, that's a huge clue that it was borrowed from another language somewhere along the way. Okay, this brings us to the famous story of the alphabet. And, well, it's time to bust a major myth. This is one of those things that a lot of people, even many Russians, get wrong. You've probably heard this story, right? These two brilliant Greek brothers, Cyril and Methodius, were sent to create a written language for the Slavic people so they could read the Bible. And they did. But it's not the full picture. So what did they actually create? And here it is, the real story. That super complex, kind of wild-looking alphabet on the left, Glagolic, that's what Cyril and Methodius made. It was so intricate and unique that their students eventually came up with a simpler version, based mostly on Greek letters. And as a tribute to their teacher, Cyril, they named it Cyrillic. And that's the one that ended up sticking around. So, with a new religion, Christianity, and a new alphabet, something really fascinating started to happen. Medieval Russia developed this kind of linguistic split personality. It was almost like people had two different languages living inside their heads at the same time. So if you were an educated person back then, you were basically bilingual in your own culture. You used Church Slavonic, this really formal, highbrow language for things like praying, reading scripture, and writing laws. But for talking to your family, buying stuff at the market, or, writing a love letter, you'd switch to your everyday, spoken Old Russian. And the coolest part is, we have proof. Archaeologists have dug up these 1,000-year-old pieces of birch bark with little notes scribbled on them. I'm telling you, these were the text messages of the Middle Ages. They give us this perfect snapshot of how real people actually talk to each other, about everything from borrowing money to sharing gossip. Now, no language is an island, and Russian is the perfect example of this. You should think of it like a giant linguistic sponge. Over the centuries, it just soaked up words from every single culture it bumped into, creating this incredibly rich vocabulary that tells the story of its own history. I mean, just look at this breakdown. The influences came from literally every direction. For hundreds of years, you had Turkic and Mongol rule from the east, which brought in all sorts of words related to government and money. Then, centuries later, the Russian aristocracy became completely obsessed with French. And at the same time, you had all these German words coming in for science and the military. Here's a perfect little example for you. The Russian word for pencil is karandash. Sounds completely Russian, right? Well, nope. It's a direct borrowing from Turkic languages, where karandash literally means black stone, which is, what they called graphite. We've got this language that's part ancient Slavic, part formal church speak, and it's stuffed full of words from all over Asia and Europe. It's a rich but kind of chaotic mix, right? So, how on earth did all that get shaped into the modern Russian we know today? Well, it took some serious work from reformers and even revolutionaries. It really happened in 3 giant leaps. First, you had Peter the Great, who basically kicked the door open to Europe and flooded the language with new terms. Then, about a century later, the literary genius Alexander Pushkin came along and masterfully blended all the different parts together. And finally, after the revolution, two big spelling reforms came in and basically cleaned everything up and standardized it for the modern world. What Pushkin did was nothing short of magic. He bridged this huge gap that existed. Before him, the language you wrote books in was really stiff and totally different from how people actually spoke. He's the one who created a single, flexible Russian that was beautiful enough for poetry, but also totally practical for a newspaper article or just a normal conversation. So, after more than 1,000 years of evolution, invasion, and reform, where does that leave us? What is the Russian language here in the 21st century? Well, it's this amazing synthesis of everything we've just talked about. It's a language that carries its entire complex history right there inside its grammar and vocabulary. Every single word tells a story, whether it's an ancient Slavic root, a formal term from the church, or a fashionable word borrowed from Paris. When it comes right down to it, a language really is like a nation's diary. And the story of Russian reveals this constant process of change, struggle, and adaptation. Its entire history of invasions, epic reforms, and cultural mixing is written directly into the words people speak every single day. It's a living monument to a complicated and, let's be honest, an utterly fascinating past.